4 days ago, it was 91 degrees in Philadelphia. People were in shorts. Ice cream lines stretched out the door. It was the hottest April day that city had seen since 2002. Then the cold blast hit. And this week, temperatures in that same region crashed to 24 degrees. That is a 67-degree swing. In 4 days. In April. And right now, across farms from Maryland to Massachusetts, crops that were already blooming are dead. 80% of one farm's blackberry crop. Gone overnight. 60% of apple flowers. Gone. And this is not over. Because the same meteorologists who tracked this freeze are now warning that another cold system is already forming. Stay with me. Because what just happened to those crops is about to affect your grocery bill. And nobody is talking about that part. To understand why this freeze was so devastating, you have to understand what happened in the 2 weeks before it. March 2026 was the warmest March ever recorded in the continental United States. Not just warm, record-breaking. 5.2 degrees Fahrenheit above the 20th century average. The warmest in 132 years of records. And the year running from April 2025 through March 2026 was the warmest 12-month stretch ever recorded for the contiguous United States. Ever. In 131 years of data. So when April arrived, the ground was warm. The air was warm. Trees were weeks ahead of schedule. Orchards were already flowering. Berry bushes were already budding. Strawberries were setting fruit. And then the atmosphere did what it does in 2026. It swung. Hard. Here's the detail that tells the real story. It is not the cold that kills crops in a late-season freeze. It is the timing. And this year, the timing could not have been worse. A blossom on an apple tree can survive 28 degrees Fahrenheit when it is still a tight bud. It can survive 25 degrees when it is at pink stage. But once it opens fully, once it turns into the flower that becomes the fruit, its threshold drops to 28 degrees. 1 hour below that, and it is dead. This spring, thanks to that record warm March, blossoms across the mid-Atlantic and Northeast were already fully open. 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the normal calendar. Not budding. Not pink stage. Open. Exposed. And on the night of April 20th and into the morning of April 21st, the cold front arrived. Allentown, Pennsylvania dropped to 24 degrees Fahrenheit. A new record low for that date. Dulles, Virginia hit 27 degrees. Charlottesville, Virginia hit 28 degrees. And in Canaan Valley, West Virginia, the thermometer dropped to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. 9 degrees. In late April. In a region where trees had been flowering for weeks. Now let me tell you what farmers were doing the night before those temperatures arrived, because what they did is extraordinary. And it still was not enough. Ben Butler is the farm manager at Butler's Orchard in Germantown, Maryland. He knew the freeze was coming. He did not sleep that night. He ran irrigation systems across his entire operation, spraying water continuously over his crops through the cold, not to keep them wet, to keep them alive. Here is the science behind it. When water freezes on a plant, it releases heat. A thin shell of ice actually holds the temperature at exactly 32 degrees around the blossom inside. As long as you keep spraying, the plant stays at 32. The moment you stop, the temperature drops to whatever the air temperature is. 24 degrees. 9 degrees. So Butler kept his systems running all night. For hours. Pumping water over his strawberries, his blackberries, his apple trees, his cherry trees. He also used row covers. The thick agricultural blankets that trap ground heat around vulnerable plants. He did everything a farmer can do. And then the temperatures bottomed out at 25 degrees near his fields. And he walked out in the morning. And told AccuWeather exactly what he found. His words. About 60% of the apple flowers and early fruit. Gone. Cherries. More like 40%. About 80% of the blackberry crop. Gone. He held up a strawberry for the camera, pointed to it, said, "This strawberry that's developing is dead. Most of these are dead as well." He had done everything right. The cold did not care. But Butler's orchard was not alone. And the desperation farmers showed that night tells you how much was at stake. In Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, at Noer Vineyards, they did not spray water. They deployed helicopters, actual helicopters, flying low over the vineyard in the dark, specifically to push the warmer air from higher up in the atmosphere downward onto the vines. Because when temperatures drop overnight, a strange thing happens. Warmer air sits above colder air near the ground. A layer called a temperature inversion. Helicopters flying 20 to 30 feet off the ground can churn that warmer layer downward, raising ground-level temperatures by as much as 3 to 5 degrees. 3 to 5 degrees is the difference between survival and crop death at that threshold. So they flew. Through the night. Over their vines, trying to push warmth down from above. Some vineyards lit controlled flames near their vines. Open fire next to their crops in the middle of the night, because that is what a $50,000 overnight crop loss makes a farmer willing to try. The freeze came anyway. Here is what most reports are not telling you. The damage done to Mid-Atlantic farms this week is not just a local agricultural story. It is the beginning of a price shock that will hit grocery shelves in summer. And nobody is calculating it yet. Fruit crops do not fail quietly. They fail forward. A strawberry killed at blossom stage in April means no strawberry on the shelf in June. An apple flower killed in April means no apple in September. A cherry blossom destroyed means grocery stores in July replacing domestic supply with imports from Chile, Argentina, and South Africa, at higher prices, passed directly to you. The USDA has already flagged conditions across multiple regions simultaneously. On April 24th, freeze warnings were active for valley locations in southeastern Washington, southern Idaho, western Colorado, Utah. The same cold system that hit the Mid-Atlantic is working its way west. And critically, the agricultural weather highlights published by the USDA on April 24th flagged something else entirely. Critically dry conditions on the central and southern high plains. Significant stress on rangeland, pastures, and winter wheat. The wheat crop that supplies flour to bakeries across the country is already under stress from drought. And now the fruit crop of the Mid-Atlantic has been hit by a freeze, and the vegetable crops of the Pacific Northwest are under freeze warnings simultaneously. 3 different agricultural zones. 3 different threats, at the same time, in late April. Here is why this keeps happening. And why the meteorologists are now warning that it will keep happening again and again through the rest of this spring. The Climate Prediction Center issued a probabilistic hazards outlook this week. Their language was precise and it was alarming. They wrote that temperature anomalies of -10 to -20 degrees Fahrenheit are possible across the plains, through the Appalachians, and into the Northeast. 10 to 20 degrees below normal, not for a single morning, but for multiple days. They identified an elevated risk of much below normal temperatures stretching from the Central Plains eastward, through parts of the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, and into the northern Mid-Atlantic. The same AccuWeather meteorologist who tracked the April 20th freeze added a warning that sent a chill through every agricultural extension office in the country. Due to atmospheric patterns in the northern Pacific, he said, additional cool periods are possible later in April and into May. Later in April, into May. The freeze that destroyed 80% of one farm's blackberry crop is not the last freeze of this spring. More cold is coming. Now here's the collision that nobody is naming directly. The same warming trend that made March 2026 the hottest on record is the exact force that is making these late freezes more destructive, not less. This is the paradox that keeps agricultural scientists awake. A warmer baseline means plants bloom earlier. Orchards that used to flower in late April are now flowering in early April. Some are flowering in late March. That is weeks of additional exposure to the one thing early spring cannot reliably promise. Freedom from frost. The last frost date in many Mid-Atlantic and Northeast locations has not shifted as fast as the warming trend has pushed bloom dates forward. The window between first bloom and last frost has not closed. In many places, it has widened, which means farmers who are planting on historical schedules are watching their crops open up to cold air that still arrives in late April, the same week it always has, while their blossoms are already weeks ahead of where they were 30 years ago. The record-warm March that made 2026's spring so beautiful for everyone who was not a farmer is the same record-warm March that set the crops up to be destroyed by a freeze that arrived exactly when late April freezes always arrive, right on schedule, into a season that had already decided it was summer. And here is the number that puts all of it in context. The year from April 2025 to March 2026 was not just the warmest on record for the United States. January through March 2026 was the driest on record for the contiguous United States, the warmest, and the driest in 131 years at the same time. Drought and heat stress a crop at the root. Then a freeze hits it from above. The ground below is cracked and dry. The air above drops to 9 degrees, and the plant is already at its limit before either threat arrives. The USDA noted significant stress on rangeland, pastures, and winter wheat on the central and southern high plains as of April 24th. Winter wheat that was planted last fall. That survived a brutal January storm that killed 173 people. That survived the blizzard of 2026 in February. That survived a Category 5 regional snowfall index blizzard in March. Is now stressed from drought in April while freeze warnings blanket the regions to its north. This is not a bad weather week. This is the accumulated pressure of a year of extreme conditions bearing down on a food system that was designed for the climate of the 20th century. Let me bring you back to the ground. To a single farm. Because the number that tells the real story is not in a weather forecast. It is in what Ben Butler said next. After walking his fields at Butler's orchard on the morning of April 21st, after seeing 60% of his apple flowers dead, after counting 80% of his blackberry crop gone, after pulling back a row cover to find strawberries that would not become strawberries, he said something that every farmer within 500 miles of that field was thinking. He said the crops they had that were not protected by irrigation or frost row covers took quite a bit of damage, and even some protected crops did not survive. That phrase is the whole story. Even protected crops did not survive. He did everything right. He used water, he used blankets, he stayed up all night. And a 25-degree low in late April after the warmest March in 132 years still found the gap in his defenses. Because there is no defense against a 67-degree temperature swing in 4 days. There is preparation. There is mitigation. But there is no wall you can build against a 67-degree swing. Philadelphia hit 91 degrees on April 15th, the earliest 90-degree day in that city since 2002. 5 days later, the same region was under a freeze warning. Temperatures in parts of Virginia dropped to single digits. Record lows shattered across Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia. 80% of one farm's blackberry crop was gone by morning. 60% of apple flowers across the mid-Atlantic were dead. Helicopters flew through the night over vineyards trying to push warm air down. Farmers stood in their fields with hoses, spraying water in the dark, racing the thermometer. And the Climate Prediction Center is already warning of additional cold periods in late April, into May. The same atmospheric pattern that broke every heat record this March is now swinging the other direction. Not moderating, swinging. And the crops that opened 2 to 3 weeks early because of that warmth have no way to close back up when the cold arrives. They are open, exposed. And the next cold system is already forming. The freeze you just watched happen is not the anomaly. It is the new shape of April. And every farmer between the plains and the Atlantic coast is now looking at their calendar, their forecast, and their open blossoms, trying to calculate how much more they can lose before the math no longer works. In Germantown, Maryland, Ben Butler already knows that number. He counted it in dead strawberries that morning, row by row, one by one, in a field that smelled like spring. And looked like the end of it.